Good morning, everyone. We'd like to welcome Dr. Anjana A Karumathil. Ma'am is currently an associate professor at IIM Kozhikode, and prior to this role, she has an industry experience of 15 years. Ma'am's industry experience spans across financial services, energy, and taxation. She also has international work experience across Australia, UK, USA, and Qatar. Ma'am has received several awards for her leadership based assignments and is an avid researcher. Dear ma'am, we welcome you and we request you to take over the session.
Thank you very much for having me. Let's get started. Let me share my screen with you and we will go from there. All right. Can you see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Let's get started. So let's talk a little bit about the gig economy, what it means for people that are planning to join the gig economy, for the organizations that are hiring giggers, gig workers, and then what it all means for the rest of us. So this is the agenda for today. I begin by introducing you to the gig economy, a few foundational principles, the pluses and minuses of being a gig worker, in short called a gigger. And if you're a manager in a traditional organization, what does that mean for you? And then we'll summarize the key points. So in my opinion, there are three foundational ideas constituting the gig economy. The term gig economy, it refers to a whole new small but emerging labor market that is characterized by short-term contracts and freelance works. And this kind of short-term contracts are called gigs. The term gig comes from the music industry where performers call their next performance their next gig. The term gig economy is used synonymously with things like with words like platform economy, independent work, micro work, crowdsourcing work. These are all pretty much the same thing. So what it includes is a bunch of people called service providers whom we call gig workers or giggers. That's on one side. And on the other side, there's a bunch of organizations or individuals called clients who have certain pieces of work that they need to do. Now, in the traditional mechanism, in the traditional model of employment, these people that have work to do would not automatically go and connect with people that have the skills to do that work. But where the gig economy differs is that instead of these two people connecting directly with each other, the gig economy introduces a third party, a technology-based intermediary between these clients and these gig workers. Now, this technology-based intermediary is essentially a technology platform using very complex AI and ML algorithms. So in the long run, what the platform does is that using these rather complicated algorithms, it kind of takes over the role of an HR manager, especially for the gig worker. So what does the platform do? The platform decides whom to match, which gig worker to match with which client. Then once a person is matched, it sets work performance targets for this gig worker. Then it monitors whether the gig worker has performed according to the standards that the algorithm sets. And how does the algorithm set targets? Based on what makes it the most profitable. So then performance is monitored. If the performance is in line with what the algorithm wants, then it rewards the gig worker. And if it is not in line with what is expected, it also has the power to impose a penalty. Sometimes the penalty is so strict that it involves getting kicked out of the platform and never finding any work again. So in doing so, in assuming this kind of an intermediary role and being the person that is matching, being the entity that is matching the seller, the provider of a service with the person that is in demand for the service, as an intermediary, it's like a broker, and it assumes the most powerful role within this work relationship. And the person that is in the least power in this relationship is the gig worker. Now, I'll show you in a little bit more detail what this means and what technology does in terms of changing the relationship. So see, this right here is a traditional work relationship. There's an employer and then there's an employee, and that relationship, the dyadic, this relationship is a two-way relationship. It's called dyadic. Is based on what's called an employment contract. Now, the employment contract is typically a long-term thing, and it lists out in clear detail. But the employer writes out what all are the things that the employee is expected to do. Now, the employee does them. When the employee does them, in return, what are the what is the emolument to the employee, so that emolument is given in terms of a salary. Now, if it's a sales or commission based job, then there's a commission as well. Now, all of these things are clearly stated in the employment contract. Now, in addition to what is stated by the employer, there is also a series of benefits that the employee gets for being part of this relationship. That includes money in their employment provident fund, pension money, health care for themselves and their loved ones, in some cases education for their children, or transportation to work. A whole series of these kinds of benefits are given to the employee, and some of these are mandated by the government as well, because these are what are deemed necessary for the employee to work safely and in a very productive way within this relationship. In the same way, the employer also expects that the employee will stay loyal to the organization, demonstrate organizational citizenship behavior, what means a little bit, occasionally staying back late, helping other people, taking on work for other people who might not be able to do these things. So this kind of an implicit, on the one hand, there's a long-term employment contract, but on the other hand, there is also an implicit moral contract that of loyalty that is there between these two entities. Now, what the AI-based platform does, it is totally crumbles all that. So there is, instead of having an employment contract, there is a very short-term contract required to do only a specific piece of work. So this is not client. So client may be an individual or even an employer and organization. If they have a small piece of work, say let's say doing payroll or something, what they do is they take that piece of work, they put it as a job on this platform. So look at a platform like Upwork or whatever. They put it as a job there. There's a bunch of giggers, so independent workers who have the skills to do this job. They will constantly be looking at this platform, and once a job is posted, either they will agree, they will indicate a willingness to do this, or if there are many people that are willing to do it, then they will bid for the job. And so once a list of suppliers and a list of providers and a list of clients is available, then the AI does this job of matching the two. Now, what happens is that in some cases, these contracts are usually for only a few hours. Sometimes the work may take a few months, sometimes a few weeks, and in some cases only a few hours. And the contract is very airtight in the sense that it only requires them to do that piece of work for that X number of hours, and after that you're gone, moving on to the next thing, and the client is also moving on to the next thing. So when in this kind of a short-term, very, very short-term kind of relationship, first of all, there is no relationship. It just becomes a very contractual thing. Also, there is no employment contract good for the client. Now, what the client does is the client is completely offloading a whole series of invisible costs that they may have to incur had they employed this person on a long-term basis. So none of the benefits that I spoke about earlier need to be provided. So all of that is cost cutting. And which client does not like cost cutting? So there's that. So it is good for the client in that sort of way, and that completely, because it's just, instead of treating the employee as a human being, they treat the employee as another organization. They have to deal with their own problems. And because of that, things are much easier and cheaper for the client, and that's why a lot of clients like it. Now, think of it from the perspective of the gigger. See, now, depending on where you are in your age and in your employment status, people that are younger, that are the Gen Z and the millennials and all of these people, they don't necessarily value a long-term employment relationship. This is not a group, this is not a bunch of people that value that. They would much rather do some challenging work with one and then move on to challenging work with the other, and so on and so forth. Earlier, this was not a possibility, but now with this intermediary, the lack of long-term commitment works well for people that enjoy this kind of employment. Now, what it means is it opens for them a career path that was not earlier available, and this kind of career path is what is called in the literature as boundaryless careers. So what that means is I can be doing a number of gigs at the same time. I can be doing a small piece of work for IIM. On the other hand, I could be doing a small piece of unrelated work for IBM, for TCS, for some other organization doing something else, or helping a vacuum cleaner company, all at the same time. When that happens, I am not restricted by organizational boundaries, and that's what's called a boundaryless career. So the intermediary nature of this AI based platform has opened up a whole new career path for people that value flexibility and the ability to work from Hawaii this week, or from the beach next week, or from Starbucks the third week, or from their house the fourth week. So this kind of a new career path is now available, and for people that love this kind of freedom, this is indeed the way to go. So now we spoke a little bit about the algorithm, and the algorithm is really the key thing that makes this happen. So the algorithms are self-learning algorithms. They are dynamic. They keep changing them. They learn from people's behavior, and they keep changing themselves every single day. Sometimes these things are so opaque. The algorithm is called a black box because unless if you're an AI ML type person, then you understand it. But most people don't understand it. Now, most of us have used these kinds of platforms for online and offline services, and then we know how it works, but there's a salient difference in the way some of these algorithms operate. So if you were to look at Uber, which I'm sure most of us have used, Uber is an online taxi service. What do? You go to the Uber, you open the app, and then now it detects where you are, you say where you want to go, and it will give you 2-3 rates depending on which kind of vehicle you want. That's an online service, and it uses this idea what is called commoditized matching. See, if you are in an Uber, you don't really care who comes. It's a head with 2 hands and 2 legs, and so long as it knows how to drive a vehicle, you're okay. This is what is called commoditized matching. So this is a situation where you want uniformity. You want somebody that has a basic level of skill, and you don't really care who it is. That's what's called commoditized matching. In an online setting, that's an app like Uber, and in an offline setting is an organization like TeamLease. TeamLease is one of India's largest staffing and recruitment agencies. So if you have like an IT complex and you need a large bunch of people that are housekeeping or office staff or any of those people, TeamLease can give it to you. You don't really care who exactly it is. They have to be able to do the work, and they have to have a certain level of skill, and they are all uniform. So that's what's called commoditized matching the requirement as a commodity with a bunch of people who are fairly uniform. Now, on the other, that's one kind of matching done by the algorithm. The other kind of matching is what's called differentiated matching. Now, that happens when the kind of work that's involved requires is nuanced skill. So, say for example, if you have a very complicated IT type of project or a very complicated coding work, then the kind of person you don't want a uniform person just like anybody else. You want somebody that has a niche skill, and a platform where you can get these kinds of people is Upwork. And Upwork is the world's largest gig worker platform, where the kind of work that's offered there is usually work that requires a certain level of technical skill, abstraction, management, that kind of skill. And you think of an offline version. So this is very niche and differentiated. An offline version of this is this organization called Rapid Kings. Not sure if you've heard of them. Rapid Kings, you can also contact them online, but Rapid Kings is probably not that popular because they're a very niche celebrity engagement organization. They're very large, but if you want to get, say, Shah Rukh Khan to come to your event, you'll have to contact Rapid Kings and you go from there. Now, for services that we are, we have commoditized, it is easy for consumers to move from an online to offline platform. So which means it is easier for people to adopt AI algorithms to do this, which is why Uber is very popular, and which is why because we are so used to riding in an auto or taking a taxi or whatever, and we don't really care who does it. And when that's the case, we have what is called less consumer friction, which means that it is easy for these kinds of algorithms to replace the human connection. So instead of calling a taxi or an auto person whom you always knew and whose number you have saved, instead of that, now it is totally okay for most of us to take a random person's auto or taxi every day. That is why Uber is very popular. But instead, if you were to look at a platform like Upwork, as much as there's a lot of people that make money off of it, we are still in a phase where you need a particular skill with particular person with a particular kind of skill, and they were engaged in a certain way with a certain kind of contract and all of that. So despite the volume of work that gets done through Upwork is a lot less famous and popular than say Uber, because or even Swiggy or any of those, because what it requires is differentiated matching, and there's always a certain level of fear and hesitation on the side of the customer to engage people through these kinds of AI-based platforms. That's it. These are Upwork is becoming very popular these days, and it's that kind of matching is what's called differentiated matching. Now, let's now look at the size of the gig economy in the Indian context. These numbers are from the latest Niti Aayog report on the gig economy. So you can see that 7.7 million people are already here. So that's 77 lakhs for us. And COVID has played an important role in increasing the number of people in the gig economy. Now, earlier, most people joined the gig economy and did gig work because they could not find a regular job. Now, a lot of people are in the gig economy because they want to be here and they value the flexibility, and they would much rather do this than traditional work. And you know how during COVID time, companies let a lot of people go, and people don't want to go through that again. So they have joined the gig economy. So that has partly contributed to this increase. You can also see how the projections are that it will increase threefold, at least more than that actually, by 2030, already making a substantial contribution to the GDP as well. Now, this last these 22, 47, 31, these figures are the ones I found interesting. This is the distribution of the population of gig workers that do work that require low, medium, and high levels of skill. So if you were to draw a distribution of this now, it will peak in the peak will be with people that have medium level of skill. So the low level skill examples of that would be a food delivery guy or an Uber guy, and high level of skill would be somebody that is giving you a niche real estate consulting or some such thing. Think of a vice president in a real estate like Deloitte firm with an expertise in real estate that's doing private consulting for you. That would be high level. In the middle would be this large bunch of people called mid-level skill. So these are the people on your Upwork, the people that do your IT projects, medical transcription work, graphic designing. These are all the medium. Right now, the gig economy seems to be working well for them. But the prediction is that over a period of time, these people from the mid-level are either moving towards the low level of skill or towards the high level of skill. So what that means is a large bunch of these people are realizing that they're not making enough money where they are. So they decide to go one of two ends. They either decide to upskill themselves and become very high-end niche consultants, or they decide that manual labor is easier for them. So it's not worth, the IT work or whatever is not worth doing. So it might that they might make more money doing manual labor like driving or delivering food. So what that does is, instead of this curve that we have now that peaks at the medium level, now we're going to have a curve that's more like a donut shape with all the people coming down at the medium level, and then the numbers on the low and the high end increasing. It's an interesting prediction. It's unlikely that it might happen by 2030, but that seems to be the trend. So now if you were to ask people, what is it that they value the most? Why do they want to be part of the gig economy? The one answer that you will hear from them is autonomy, flexibility. So it means that they have complete control over when they work, how they work, what kind of people they work with, how much they work with, and so on. And if you have the flexibility to work in Starbucks or in your home or on the roadside, really anywhere, there is no ceiling on how much money you can make. As the more productive you are and the more work you push out into the economy, then the more money you will make. Now, earlier, if you had to make some money in a foreign currency, you had to migrate to that country and then find some work there. Now that is not necessary. If you are an IT professional in India and you have a profile on Upwork, and if you have the kind of skills that somebody in the US needs, and they engage you using that platform, the money you are getting is probably US dollars. You can earn in US dollars without moving from your chair. Now, this is a huge advantage, and for people that are making this kind of money, it is excellent. That said, if you were to ask people what they dislike the most about being in the gig economy, they'll tell you that it is the instability of income generation. The technical term for it is employment precarity. What that means is, on the one hand, so in terms of dollar per hour, if you were to consider dollar per hour cost, if you were in the gig economy, you would make way more dollar per hour than you would make if you were a regular employee. That said, there is no guarantee that the dollar per hour will come tomorrow and the day after and the day after that. So that is what is called the precarity of employment. Now that does not necessarily, contrary to public expectation, that does not necessarily make the gig worker's life a lot more risky than a regular employee's life. So what that means is, so for example, today I might make, if I'm a gig worker, today I might make 100, tomorrow I might make 0, and the day after that also I might make 0. But there's always the possibility that the day after that I will make 100, then the day after that I will make 200, then the 500, then 1,000, and so on and so forth. So there is always, the highs are not that high and the lows are not that low. So instead, if you look at a regular employee's work, I might be making 1,000 a month. 1,000. For as long as I have that employment, I'm getting that 1,000, probably getting a little bit of commission also. But the day that employment goes for any reason, I'm going off to 0 for an extended period of time. So the highs are very high and the lows are very low. Over there, the highs are not so high, but the lows, you can always recover from the lows, and it all might add up and balance in the long run. So those are two different kinds of risks depending on which part of the economy you choose to be in. The other problem is that when we spoke about the employment contract, we spoke about how a lot of benefits are given to regular employees. But if you're a gigger, none of that comes to you. So as you get older, these things become more important, and then when they are taken away from you, you do feel the pinch. There's also, if you have a problem in the workplace, in a regular work setting, there's a redressal forum. There's a bunch of people that will listen to you and probably give you a solution. In the gigs space, there is no such thing. Also, you may have joined the gig economy because you want to be a gigger and gives you flexibility, but that's not how the rest of society views it. We are a society that evaluates people depending on their constant contribution to the economy, and that is in a way determined by the stability of employment and the stability of income, and also the magnitude of that income. When you are in a job where there is, the income is unstable and it's very risky, the rest of society that does not understand the flexibility aspect tends to view it as, oh, you're doing it because you can't find a regular job. And because of that, there's a social stigma, and the older you get in the gig economy, there's a social stigma around you being a person unfit for permanent employment, and there's a stigma around that kind of status. So then it raises, we should look at it from the other perspective as well. It raises the question of, should organizations hire gig workers? So if you're a manager in a regular organization, should you hire a gig worker or should you not? So if the kind of work that you have requires a certain level of skill and cheap labor, then you must hire a gig worker. So for example, if you're a startup and you have a lot of admin work that needs to be done, it's good to hire a gig worker. You get access to a labor pool which you normally don't get access to. Sometimes it might be cheaper to hire somebody from Romania or Philippines to do the same work if it can be done online. Also, you don't have to deal with employment contracts. There's no long-term commitment. If it's a small piece of work, you can even hire as part of a person for that tiny micro work. And as easy as it is to hire them, it is equally easy to fire them as well. So if that's the kind of work you need, then yes, you absolutely must hire a gig worker. At the same time, when you're hiring a gig worker, you should understand that you're hiring somebody that has a history of no stability. So if you need somebody for an extended period of time, then that probably a gig worker is not the answer. And also the nature of the work is such that that's what gives you strategic advantage, competitive advantage over your competitors. Then you probably should not use a gig worker to do it, because their confidentiality arrangement is not the same as having an employee. And also they flipped from one employer to another very quickly. So you cannot expect any long-term loyalty for them. also from the gig worker standpoint, sure they have a profile, sure they have client feedback and all of that. But remember that this is not somebody that you have trained, and what you see is what you get. Many cases, client feedback can be manipulated. So you got to immediately ascertain the person's knowledge level. So that's also a risk that managers in regular organizations must be mindful of. However, if the work is very routine, very low priority, totally not strategic, and very like back end payroll processing kind of work that only requires a base level of skill, requires cheap labor and things to be done quickly, then gig workers are probably the way to go. So these are the main things that we spoke about. The gig economy is a small part of the economy, right? It's a small segment, but it's small but rapidly growing. And if you're a gig worker, the variety of work that's available there makes it easy for a gigger to find work that's suitable to their level of skill and their level of life, their kind of lifestyle. So if you value flexibility for employers and giggers, this is the way to go. The more efficient you are, and the faster you get things done, the more you are rewarded. At the same time, this flexibility does come at a cost because you're not getting any health benefits or employer any other benefits. What that means is, the kind of work it entails to remain productive may result in greater healthcare burdens. Now, we spoke about one of the negative things being the lack of a clear work identity and then a drop in social status. See, on the one hand, it's good to have flexibility, to be doing work that you want, but we are enmeshed in a society, and within that society, the moment somebody does anything that's contrary to social expectation, and social expectation is to find a steady job and a steady source of income. The moment somebody is contrary to social expectation, there is going to be a consequence in some shape or form, and they have to be willing to accept that consequence. And so, one of the consequences that comes from this is the lack of social status. The other consequence that comes from this is that you may think that the work that you do is being on the platform when I want, it gives me the kind of flexibility that I want. But you see, these platforms are a lot more manipulative than we believe. We tend to think that, I will only be online when I want, and that's what the flexibility, that's the advantage that I get. However, these platforms are very smart. They have inbuilt into them the code that is what is called behavioral nudges. What it does is that it can manipulate your behavior by giving you certain rewards or threatening with you with certain penalties, so that you incrementally work in a way that the platform wants you to work and not the way you want to work. And this effect is so incremental, and it happens small effect over a period of time, that over a period of time, instead of you being online when you want, you are being online when the algorithm wants. And when does the algorithm want you to be online? All the time. So you tend to think that that is by choice, but it is not. It is actually by design. And when you end up, instead of doing the limited work hours that you believe you need to survive, you end up working all the time, because the platform rewards long hours of working and productivity. And when that happens, when you're online all the time, other dimensions of your life are going to suffer. Your work-life balance, your relationships with other people, your family, your friend, going out, being social, none of that is going to happen. And also remember that most of these cases, whether it is driving or whether it is doing online work, a lot of this work involves you sitting in one place in front of a computer or driving a car. Whatever it is, it requires a lot of stationary activity, and what that does over a period of time, it makes you sick. And because when it makes you sick, you lack any movement, you don't have time to go shopping for a healthy meal, you don't really have an off time, and this constant level of low amount of stress that goes around for extended periods of time is what makes people sick. And when you fall sick, there isn't a healthcare system, there isn't a benefit that the employer gives you. You have to deal with your own. And so now the money that you have made is going to increase the burden for the healthcare system. So this is not to say you should not take on gig work. These are the pros and cons of being part of the gig economy. Now, for some people, these risks might be okay to take. Those people should take them. For others, it might not be, and they should consider alternate employment options. So these are the main things that I wanted to talk to you today, and I'm happy to take any questions at this time.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for extensive presentation.
Sure.
Ma'am, coming across through a presentation, one thing that of my interest that I found here, you spoke about the AI algorithms role in hiring the giggers. Can you throw some more light on it? Can you give some more information on that part of it?
On hiring the giggers.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. So, like I said, the AI algorithm in the platform is the one that matches the service providers with the client. So, for example, if you were to call an Uber, what does Uber do? So you say here, I'm here, and then you want to go somewhere else, and what the Uber app, the AI algorithm now sends out a message to all the people, all the drivers in the vicinity that you are looking for a ride. Now, how does Uber decide whom to send it out to? The algorithm has the power to decide whom to send it out to. Now, it may do that based on, one, proximity is one of the factors, but there are several criteria that are employed by the algorithm to determine which driver gets your message. So, for example, there are certain mandatory payments that Uber takes from drivers. Now, there's a lot of protest happening from the drivers' end on whether it is legal or not legal, whether it's too much or too little. But there are certain mandatory payments they take. So now you see, the algorithm is very clever. Now, if there is a driver that has not paid their mandatory tax, the person might be standing right next to your location but will not get a message. If now the way Uber extracts that money from the drivers is through online payment. So, for example, if you have, say, I am, for example, not an online payment person. I pay by cash whenever I go. Now, Uber wants to extract this payment, this mandatory payment. Then Uber will only show that driver rides where the person is willing to pay online. Now, what happens the moment the person pays online? Uber has already taken a part of it into that towards that payment due from that driver. So now, instead, if I were paying cash to the driver, Uber is not getting the money. So the algorithm, in a way, decides who gets the ride and who doesn't. Also, the rides that the people that get the notification are the people that are willing to go to what is called the surge areas. See, places like workplaces like IT parks and all that are surge areas in that time from say around 8:30 till about 10 o'clock, which is when most people go off work, and a suitable time in the evening. Many people are unwilling to go to the area at that time because the traffic is heavier and it becomes difficult. So over a period of time, the algorithm monitors the driver's behavior. And when you go in these surge areas, you get a higher rate, and the drivers that see the notification are the drivers that comply with the platform. So in a way, the algorithm determines who gets the ride. So now, as a client, I don't get penalized for paying cash or Google Pay, but the people that need the money, the service providers, they do.
So, ma'am, do you think there's an opportunity for software developers like how we have Uber app, Swiggy app, to develop an app for giggers or Generation Z so that they can just click on it and say, this is the work I want? And then, do you think there's an opportunity like that?
Yeah, so Upwork is indeed like that. Upwork is a platform, the world's largest gigger platform, and it is indeed like that. So what you can do is it's like a matrimonial profile. Okay, if you think of it, you have a profile that you'll set up with all your plus points and a nice photo of you smiling. It's the same way the client will also have a profile of telling everybody how amazing they are, and this is the work they need to do. Now, it is the AI algorithm that matches the two. So, if just because a client contacted you does not mean that you should take on the work. So you get absolutely flexibility to determine what you want to do. But in many cases, this client contacting people for work and all is a very rare proposition. It is usually the other way around. There's a lot of gig workers that are begging for scraps for any work that comes that seems to meet their requirement. And you know how it is when cost differentiation becomes the primary criterion. Everybody pushes the price down, and nobody stands to gain in that kind of arrangement other than the client.
Oh, dear.
Now, even in your presentation and even in your previous question, you are addressing the question still arise whether this gig economy is to be legal or illegal, and also in the cons you addressed, very limited regulations are there for this gig economy. So, what do you think as a best way the policy makers can design and implement regulations so that this gig economy becomes more inclusive and also sustainable?
Yeah, see, this is a very difficult question. And as much as the government of India and different state governments have tried to do some of this, there's a social security code that has now come up 2020. I believe India is the only country that has at least something. Many of these its clauses are very vague and very difficult to implement. And the foundational reason for that is that the gig economy does not fit into any of the categories of labor that we have put in place when we started putting together our laws for this country. Typically, we have what is called an employee, and then we have a contractor. Now, these two are very clear what is there and what is not there. Gig workers don't fall into either of this category. And it is not a simple thing to add an entire new employment category. And now, because of the ambiguity in their status, there is also ambiguity around what legal protections must be afforded to them. On the one hand, for employees, full protection is there. You have healthcare, you have a whole series of other benefits, but you are expected to work for extended periods of time. For a contractor, if you're a highly skilled contractor, it's very clear. Even for contractors, there is a certain level of benefits that's afforded to them. If a contractor comes and works in your office and you harass them, there is a way the contractor can get some justice. But for people that are in the gig economy, so if you say, for example, if you're a food delivery guy and you're delivery Swiggy, if you're a Swiggy person and if you're riding somewhere and you are in an accident, you must have read this in the news. So people are in accidents all the time, and many cases, sadly, they lose their lives. What do they get for it? Who is responsible for it? Nobody. Do they get any money from the Swiggy company? No, they will probably get a note of condolence, and that's that. But that's not the case when an employee passes. No, so the fact that all the benefits are towards the client and all the risks are towards the gigger makes it a very difficult thing to do. And also to your question, their ambiguous status makes it their responsibility. So it becomes very difficult for this is not to say that legal procedures and protection is not necessary. It absolutely is. And gig workers have realized and in a good way as well, that the one way that they can get any legal protection in terms of political support or any of that is by forming unions. So earlier, see, the gig economy is designed to isolate workers, so that that's why you use a computer, right? I'm a gig worker, I'm sitting at this computer and I'm doing my work, or I'm a driver, I'm using my phone and I'm doing my work, and it isolates me from other drivers. I don't know who the other drivers are. But now people have seen that there is strength in numbers, because now you're a very powerless person as an individual. So the only way you can build some power is by grouping and ganging together. So now there is a union. So now there is an Indian Federation of app-based taxi workers, and there's a very famous person in that called Sheikh Salahuddin, who seems to be friendly with everybody, including Rahul Gandhi. There are lots of pictures of him. In Telangana, there's a gig worker union and federation. So these unions are doing some work in terms of getting some, justice for the harassment and for the poor work conditions and all the extra money that the platform seems to extract from them and all of that. But still, there's a long way to go. Is it a good start? Yes, but do they have adequate legal protection? Is it coming anytime soon? I would doubt it. Kerala is making some steps in that direction because there's a large gig population here. Rajasthan has done something. Telangana, this union is there. And at a national level also some work is happening, but definitely long way to go. That the idea is you choose to be in it, so now you bear the brunt of it.
Yeah. Ma'am, to add on to this question, is there any evidence-based research available on understanding what is the long-term implication of the gig economy? So, what is the extent of research dimension in
So
terms
there's
of
plenty.
the?
So there's plenty. So there's research on the economic aspect of having a large bunch of gig workers. There is also lots of research on the psychological impact of having an entire sector of the working population like this. So if you were to think of the economic impact is that there's a bunch of people with unstable income. and having a very risky, precarious population that is growing, it kind of negates all the cool things that we have taught our earlier generations about working. Working is a means of stability. You will raise a family, you will have a regular income, or you'll go abroad and then you'll make more money. These kinds of principles that we have taught generations is, totally now being thrown out the window. New forms of work are coming, and along with it, having a bunch of people with risky employment is not a good thing for the economy, because our economic growth cannot be predicted in any meaningful way if you have a bunch of people whose day by day income is unstable. Now you leave that. That's one part of it. The other dimension of research shows the psychological impact. So the one thing that plenty of research shows, and this has been done across Japan, Netherlands, and a whole series of other places, is that one of the things that we need to do in order for us to retain our physical and mental health is to have a manageable level of stress and a certain sense of emotional calmness in order to do our work successfully. So in the gig economy, what it does is that what they have found is that on a good day, say for example, I'm getting lots and lots of work and makes lots of more money today, I'm on an emotional high. And let's assume that on the next day nothing happens and I don't get any work. Now I'm on an emotional low. This constant emotional high, emotional low is what is called emotional oscillation. And emotional oscillation, so extreme happiness and extreme joy alternated and on a daily basis, this taxes our brain too much. And then because that it's when you do that, people become extremely erratic and very grumpy and unpleasant, and divorces are very high among gig workers because their spouse doesn't want to see somebody that is very happy one day and violent the next day. So this, in the long run, this kind of oscillation is not good for anyone. And it's because of this that people have all kinds of lifestyle problems come from this, that your blood pressure is going up and down. You tend to overeat when you are sad. Comfort food is a thing, you see. All these mental problems that we have, we try to find physical solutions. So we yell at people, or we eat comfort food to make ourselves feel better. Instead of doing things that will make us physically better, we end up ruining our own bodies. And then what goes on, you'll go to the healthcare system, and more cancer patients and more high blood pressure patients on the healthcare system. What are they doing? They are spending public money on people who are not producing stable income to the economy. So now they will not be interested. They would much rather have somebody who's a regular income person, who has a fixed term illness or a surgery or something, and after that goes back to work, than having a gig worker that is going to have a chronic illness and is constantly using public healthcare dollars. Not good for anybody in the long run.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, another follow-up question. Right. In terms of gig economy, how can we strike a balance between innovation and entrepreneurial opportunities? At the same time, we need to ensure there is fair wage system, benefits for the workers as well as workers' protection.
So
What is
the
your
answer
view?
is that there is no simple answer, and there is no balance. It becomes very difficult. See, on the one hand, you can have innovation by having a startup. Sure, is Apple not innovative? Yes. You do not need to be a gig worker per se to be innovative. You can be innovative in multiple different ways. But if you were to become the gig worker, unless you are a high-end gig worker, the main objective of gig workers is not to be innovative. It is to survive, it is to be productive, it is to do as much work as possible and make as much money as possible while staying flexible. So yeah, entrepreneurship, innovation, all of these things are important. And it is important even for innovators to hire gig workers to do certain parts of the job. But to rely on gig workers for innovation is probably not the right way to do. And there is no such thing as, I wish there were a way to balance it. Given all the risks that are happening that come with being a gig worker, it's very difficult to find that balance. That's my view. Somebody else might have a different opinion.
Ma'am, how do you feel society can leverage on some of the pros which you talked about gig economy? How
Yeah.
society can
So society already is. So society comprises of who? The individuals that are in the gig economy. So that's the giggers, as well as the organizations that are employing them. See, there's plenty of research showing that the organizations that are employing the gig workers is increasing in number in India and across the world, because it's cheaper, for the simple reason that it's cheaper and it is less risky. Who does not like that? And there is no need to give them any pension or anything. Oh, they are delivering food and they died. Okay, no problem. Send somebody else to deliver the food. This is like nirvana for most organizations. So of course that is going to increase. So in that way, society is already taking much advantage of the positive aspects of gig work, and so are gig workers. So for example, if you are a 16-year-old and you understand graphic design very well, and you want to make some extra money that you can use to go travel or something, by all means people do this as a side hustle and make extra money. So many people are rich using the gig economy. Aren't they part of society? Yes. But on the difficulty though is that it's all good to talk about the positive aspects. The only problem happens only when one person's positive aspects come at the cost of another person's positive aspects. So if an organization is getting cheap work done at the cost of giving a gigger a fair income, if a company is delivering food at the cost of a Swiggy driver's life, so who pays? Somebody has got to pay, right? It is usually the gigger who pays. So if you have an Uber, isn't the app making money off of every ride that you are giving? Yes. But if the car goes bad and you need to fix it, who is paying? Uber is not paying. You are paying.
Ma'am, how do you feel the gig economy? Do you think it addresses the inequalities existing in the labor market?
To see, that depends on who you ask. Sure, yeah. On the one hand, if think about it this way, does it not facilitate a migration of labor without actually migrating labor? So if, for example, I am a gig worker and I am amazing at, I don't know, pick something, Python, and somebody in the US needs somebody who's amazing at Python, can I not offer my services to somebody in the US without actually going to the US? Can I not make US dollars sitting in my house? Yes, definitely, I can. The so in a way, does it kind of close off the inequality gap? Am I not becoming equal to a US worker like that? Some ways, yeah. But at the same time, algorithms, they are wicked little creatures, and what they tend to do is they tend to perpetuate the stereotypes that already exist in our society and in our economy. So what it actually does is, on the one hand, the people that are rich get richer and the people that are poor that get poorer. And how does the algorithm facilitate that? So for example, if I have got good ratings, let us assume that I am a very good smart professional and I have got 5-10 good ratings. Now the algorithms, when every time a client is looking for a piece of work that requires somebody with my kind of skill, my profile will come first. And when my profile comes first, the client automatically thinks that I am the best person for the job and I'm going to keep on getting that more and more work. Now, I might not be, unfortunately for me, I might have not received top ratings in the first 5-10. Now my profile will come way at the bottom, right? And when most people will likely not see it. And so, I'm the poorer one, I remain poorer. So it takes a lot of effort in that kind of way. And also that, the fact that the gig economy in a way is kind of addictive in some shape or form. Everybody gets into the gig economy thinking that until I find my next job, temporarily I will do gig work. But what actually ends up happening is end up staying in the gig economy for much longer than they had anticipated, and for multiple different reasons. The comfort of mediocrity is something else, and it's unbeatable. And when you get comfortable, and not in a good way, comfortable in a bad way, it becomes very difficult to come up and get into to actually embrace discomfort. So the longer and this has negative ripple effects. The longer you stay in the gig economy, the harder it is for you to come back into the regular workforce. Because when you put a CV together and send your application off to some real organization, the period of gig work does not count. It counts as unemployment. So you might be an amazing gig worker, you must have done some amazing projects, but nobody really values that in the traditional setting. So to be seen as unemployed, then what are you doing? You're further increasing that inequality. That stereotype of, so-and-so was in the gig economy, was likely unemployed. It's a fancy term for being unemployed. So making it difficult for them to get regular employment is essentially perpetuating that inequality. So, in some way, on the one hand, yes, it does help me sell my work abroad, it does help me mitigate that inequality to some extent, but on the other hand, it does perpetuate inequality in social structures and economic structures.
Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Ma'am, one last question from our end. This kind of gig work, since it's a trend and fashion that people talk about, uh, do you advise any kind of this Generation Z are like, okay, gig economy, I can do whatever I want, whenever I want? Is it a word of caution or something that you want to say them that, okay, you can take this up, but there are certain things. You definitely did mention pros and cons, but something like a word of caution or that this, if you're getting into this, you should be prepared for this. Anything as a message that you'd like to address? This?
Yeah, I mean, see, when we say, I think I would be cautious about using the word caution, because then it automatically implies that it's a bad thing. Oh, don't get into a relationship with this person. Be cautious because that person is bad news. Um, no, I think whether it is good or bad depends on who you are and where you are in life and what you want from your career. So it's hard to, like, it's I don't think it's fair to judge it as like this evil being. It is not. It is what it is. It's a different being from what we are used to. And because we go into this new world with the expectations of the old, that's when our expectations are not met and we are in trouble. If you go in with the right understanding of what is in that new world and the right set of expectations, then you're not particularly disappointed because that's the life you have chosen. Is there anything wrong in being regularly employed? No. Is there anything wrong in being a gigger? No, not necessarily. Therefore, I would not advise any young people to not do gig work. Not at all. For people that want side hustle and make extra money, please go do some gig work. At least it will keep you productive. And instead of watching YouTube, you will make some extra money. Please do so. The only catch is when you do it long term. When you do it long term, the likelihood of you being a productive person, unless you are constantly upskilling yourself, in which case it's a whole different story. But if you are a regular blue collar gig worker, the fact that there is no career trajectory for you, there is no boss that will determine what you will do next in your career. There is no mentor network. Sure, there are people on WhatsApp groups and people advising you on what this algorithm works, how it does, and what you can do with it. There is very little to look forward to in your career, and there is not a real career trajectory that you will build for yourself. And if that's what you want, then the gig economy is not the right thing for you. Instead, if all you want is a little bit extra money while you're studying, or while your job offer isn't coming in 4 months and you need something to do an independent project for somebody, if that's the kind of thing that you want, by all means use the gig economy. Make use of it, make some money out of it while it's there, while you're healthy. Yes, do it. But in the long term, as your familial responsibilities increase and you have to plan for pension and retirement and health care and children's education and all of that, then it is important. Your standing in society becomes important. And then it is important to have, irrespective of your gender, it is important to have a career trajectory and to be able to show growth in that career trajectory, whether it is for yourself or for society at large. And simply doing random bits of work here and there for multiple organizations and having nothing to show for yourself on a CV or in your career path doesn't really add value for anyone. So therefore, that's the only time when I would warn people, so to say. I would ask them to be cautious. But if that's not what not everybody wants that. And if you don't want, then this is the right thing for you. Like there is no contract. There is no need to show up at 10 a.m. every day. You can do what you want. It's your life. It's your call. In the long run, if that's what you want, please do it. If that's not what you want, then you think twice before entering.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for taking your valuable time in giving us a very insightful presentation on various dimensions of gig economy. You have thrown us slides on the founding principles of gig economy, what are the different categories, how a gig economy differs from a traditional work economy, and you have also thrown us slides on what are the pros and cons of gig economy. And finally, you also gave us an insight on should an organization really hire a gigger and what are the key takeaways from the gig economy. Thank you so much, ma'am, for taking your valuable time and enlightening us. We hope we have We hope we have you in our future endeavors. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for your time.
Thank
Yeah.
you for your time. Thank you for having me.